Good day, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Today we have an article from ScreenRant.com dated August 4th, 2019. And the article starts off, Star Wars, 10 most underrated supporting characters in the original trilogy. So, if you like this kind of content, subscribe to the channel. It helps out a lot. So let's get on with it. The original Star Wars trilogy is one of the most successful, beloved, and pored over franchises in the history of film. Fans of the Star Wars have overturned every rock of the original trilogy, and the creation of other Star Wars films, TV shows, games, and pretty much everything else that exists in Star Wars Extended Universe has given new life to every character that appeared in the films. But fleshing out every single aspect of the movies is definitely its own unique double-edged sword. Because sure, it's awesome to learn all of this backstory and character development for characters who seem like basic placeholders, but oftentimes the backstory just makes everyone wish that a particular character had been a bigger part of the actual story. So which characters who appeared briefly in the original Star Wars trilogy seems to be tragically underrated with heaps of unexplored potential? So just putting an emphasis of that who appeared briefly in the original trilogy. So A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. Doesn't take into account the prequels or the sequels. Alright, so let's get started. Number 10, Mon Mothma. Although Mon Mothma's appearance in the original Star Wars trilogy was brief, she went on to become one of the most interesting minor characters in the extended universe. This senator and leader in the Rebel Alliance was an all-around badass, and she was instrumental in the demise of the Galactic Empire, as well as the first Chancellor of the New Republic after Palpatine's defeat. As a politician, she promoted peace, and as a rebel, she did some shady and not-so-peaceful things to try and make that happen. Her few moments in the Star Wars original trilogy definitely undersold how awesome she really is. She's definitely a person I would have liked to actually get to know more of. You know, you get to a little bit more in Rogue One. You get to see her in the Clone Wars TV series. But from the original trilogy itself, you really don't know much about her. Number 9, Wedge Antilles. Even if you don't recognize the name Wedge Antilles, you'll recognize Wedge Antilles. Wedge is one of the best pilots in the Rebel Alliance, and he's arguably the most recognizable fighter pilot behind Luke Skywalker himself. Star Wars is at its best when it's telling the story of near-mythical heroes, but characters like Wedge Antilles, who are heroic, talented, and capable without actually being the chosen one, deserved a lot more screen time than they've gotten in the Star Wars films traditionally. As one of the leading pilots in the Rebel Alliance, it would have been cool to see more of his story. Yeah, that's something that I wouldn't mind seeing, but not really a character that needs a whole movie, that's for sure. In my opinion, of course. Number 8, Admiral Ackbar. One thing that definitely sets Star Wars apart is simply the visual impact of many of its characters is so great that even a brief appearance in the Star Wars universe can leave an impression on the audience for years to come. Admiral Ackbar is definitely one of those characters that everyone will always remember, even if they don't remember much about him besides his unique attention-getting look. But the character itself actually has a fascinating backstory, and it would have been awesome to see more of the story arc of this Rebel Alliance military leader as it was happening. I agree. I mean, the Clone Wars TV series has Admiral, and I think it was Captain back then, Ackbar. And it was good backstory. So in the original trilogy, it would have been nice to have more info on Admiral Ackbar. I'd definitely watch a movie of him. Number 7, Beru Lars. Luke's relationship, or lack thereof, with his long-lost father Anakin Skywalker is a huge driving force behind the entire Star Wars saga. However, his relationship with his real parents, Owen and Beru Lars, isn't given nearly enough credit it's due in the story. Obviously, destiny will always play a huge part in the lives that all the Skywalkers seem to lead, but Luke's life in the small-town son of two, down-to-earth, humble, and kind moisture farmers was an enormous contributing factor to the entire Star Wars saga as well. For better or worse, characters like Beru are what form the backbone of the saga. Yeah, it'd definitely be cool to learn a little bit more of Beru and Owen. Even Clegg, their father, would have been kind of cool to know a little bit more about him. Number 6, Greedo. The random red shirt characters that always seem to show up just to die dramatically a few moments later seem to be designed to be as forgettable as possible, which makes Greedo's relative notoriety a pretty exceptional rarity. Most people are familiar with Greedo because of the endless debate over who shot first, but the background characterization of the bounty hunter from Rhodia definitely gives him some weight. Greedo is actually one of the mercenaries for another ultra-famous Star Wars supporting character, Jabba the Hutt. Giving Han Solo one of the most badass intros imaginable was an essential Star Wars moment, but his scene partner deserves some props too. Yeah, some Greedo in a movie would be kind of cool. Number 5, Jabba the Hutt. A successful sci-fi adventure movie relies on having lovable heroes to keep the audience invested in the action. But another essential component of a successful story is having truly hateable villains too. Obviously, he's not the big villainous kahuna of the series, but Jabba the Hutt is exceptionally creepy and gross side villain. It's easy to see why he's such a memorable character. His appearance is definitely attention-getting and hard to forget. However, it would have been interesting to see even more Jabba. Even just getting a basic explanation as to how the sentient blob became a crime overlord would have been great. Yeah, it'd be cool to have Jabba the Hutt as a main villain and a little bit of a really big of a backstory would be kind of cool. How the Hutts themselves became a crime family. Number 4, Emperor Palpatine. Emperor Palpatine was definitely creepy as hell in the original Star Wars trilogy, but he was ultimately a bit of a one-dimensional villain who didn't seem to have a lot of nuance or complexities to his character. Oh, what little an audience knew. Palpatine did what he was supposed to do for the narrative of the original trilogy, but it's insane to consider what Palpatine has ultimately meant for the entire Star Wars saga. Watching the OG films now, knowing everything that he's done and the transformation he's undergone is insane, even though it seems a little bit more than Darth Vader's boss in the original trilogies. So yeah, I mean, you don't really get to know too much of Emperor Palpatine in the original trilogy, so it probably would have been cool to flesh out his character a bit more, although we did get the prequels to know a lot more about him anyways. But yeah, the original trilogy would have been nice to get a little bit more of him. Number 3, Grand Moff Tarkin. A little extra splash of Force magic mojo is what sets Star Wars apart from so many sci-fi space stories. But the flashier elements of the Star Wars saga tends to overshadow the fact that it's actually a very interesting war story in its own right. Characters like Grand Moff Wilfin Tarkin aren't the stars of the show, but they're still really intriguing, and it would be really cool to see more of them. The road to hell is often paved by the most banal villains, and this military man who oversaw the Death Star was every bit as much of a villain as Darth Vader or even Chancellor Palpatine himself. I liked Grand Moff Tarkin. I did. Especially when they fleshed out his story a little bit more in the Clone Wars TV show. Number 2, Boba Fett. Boba Fett most definitely got a lot of coolness credibility from the moment he appeared on the Star Wars stage. But when you take the entirety of his characterization throughout all the films into account, it seems like he didn't get nearly the credit he was due from the onset. Yes, he's the most dangerous bounty hunter alive, but it's absolutely wild to realize that he is actually a clone of his father, the previous most dangerous bounty hunter alive, as well as a genetically identical to the entire army of the clone troopers. Boba's importance to the saga is clear now, but you never know that by just watching the first trilogy. That's true. There was so much of a hype with Boba Fett, but you didn't really get to see him very much, which is really too bad. Do you think Boba Fett got out of the Sarlacc pit? Let me know in the comments. Number 1, Anakin Skywalker. Darth Vader is clearly the main antagonist of the entire A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi trilogy. But it's really the man he once was that's the driving force behind everything that happens in the tale. Obviously, Vader is meant to return back to Anakin Skywalker in his last moment decision to betray Palpatine. But even though Anakin spends the entire trilogy being figuratively dead and then literally dead, it seems obvious that his character is key to the entire story. Anakin drives Luke as a character, drives the battle between dark and the light side of the Force, and is ultimately defeats the dark side in the end. So yeah, I mean, in the original trilogy it would have been nice to get a little bit more info on Anakin, but, you know, we obviously got a lot more of that in the prequel trilogy, and then obviously the Clone Wars TV series and so on. So, but yeah, what do you think about the list? What other characters, that in the old trilogy would you have liked to see a little bit more of or know more of their backstory? Let me know in the comments section. All right. So, as always, take care and have an awesome day.